Forged with a passion for steel and an iron-like eye for talent. This is the Recruiter of Steel podcast. Blast right in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Recruiter of Steel podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Rossi, and very pleased to introduce our next guest, which is going to be Brandon Farris, Executive Vice President of Steel Manufacturing Association. Brandon oversees legislative and regulatory affairs and leads SMA's public policy agenda and strategic relationships, where he was named one of Washington's 500 most influential by Washingtonian magazine in 2025. Brandon has more than 2 decades of expertise in Washington. Prior to SMA, Brandon was Vice President of Domestic Policy at the National Association of Manufacturers, known as NAM. Brandon led NAM's efforts on a broad portfolio of policy issues, including energy, environment, transportation, infrastructure, and labor. At NAM, Brandon was named by The Hill as top lobbyist in 2023 for leading industry efforts on permitting reform and regulatory overreach. After serving in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve, thank you for your service, Brandon, he started his policy career at the U.S. House Committee on Agriculture. So, Brandon, you are very, very important for the steel industry. Welcome to the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Perfect. Okay, Brandon. So before we get into all the fun world of policy and dealing with the administration and whatnot, tell us a little bit how you got your start in steel.
So I appreciate it. Thank you so much. As you were just mentioning, I have been in and around DC for a couple decades working on manufacturing policy. It's something near and dear to my heart. Both my grandparents worked in a manufacturing facility, GE Manufacturing, for their entire career. And so manufacturing is a passion that they've passed on to me. And with that, I was working for the National Association of Manufacturers, which they work on all of the issues, anything that's manufactured in the U.S. And at the time, the Steel Manufacturers Association was creating this position to come in and head advocacy. And it's something that always had a tremendous interest in. And right now, and for the foreseeable future, it's a good time to be involved with the steel industry. Just looking at both President Trump, his first term, President Biden, and now President Trump again, there is support for the steel industry in politics. And so a lot of my work is it's bipartisan, and it's something about how can we steer the right support, because Republicans, Democrats often look for ways to be able to support the 87,000 men and women that make steel in America. And so it's something that I've really loved being involved with, and something on a daily basis, going and talking to legislators and saying, how can we continue to support the folks that make steel in America?
That's great. That's great. And how long has SMA been around, Brandon?
About 30 years or so.
30 years. Okay. And tell us a little bit about the organization, right? Before coming on board. I mean, what was the formation like? What was it set out to do? And how has it evolved over time now that, you're leading a lot of efforts there?
Yeah, so SMA was founded about 30 years ago, and they represent the electric arc furnace. There's 2 ways to make steel: electric arc furnace, blast furnace. And it was founded about 30 years ago to represent the interest of the electric arc furnace, which 30 years ago, our steel industry looked very different than it does now. Now, electric furnace is about 70 to 75% of all steel manufacturing in the U.S. And so we are a majority plus of steel manufacturing in the U.S. And it continues to focus on those issues, which now are the vast majority of steelmaking. And our members are a lot of the largest steelmakers in America. Nucor is the largest steelmaker in America. They make all of their steel via electric arc furnace. Commercial Metals, Steel Dynamics, all of the largest electric arc furnace makers in the U.S. are also some of the largest steelmakers in the U.S.
Yes. Okay. And then how would you say, I mean, obviously there's been this push towards sustainability over the last ever so many decades, right? As you kind of just described. But what would you describe as the current state of steel, right? I mean, obviously we're having these sustainability efforts, but there is this big push, like you said, and bipartisan to many degrees, to bring steel manufacturing back to the U.S. Can you tell me a little bit and tell our audience what has happened to steel manufacturing and domestic production over the years, and how are we trying to bring that back, and is it working?
So that's a great question. And what we've seen since the early 1990s, the measure of a steel industry is really how industrial nations are measured. Early on, China sought to dominate manufacturing globally, and they identified, boy, if we have a steel industry that just produces, they don't care about making profits. If we have a steel industry that can just flood the global market, we can control steel supply. We can't compete with, no one can compete with China on $4 a day labor, and really not enforced environmental compliance issues. And so China, for years and years, dumped steel on the global market and just didn't seek to make a profit, just sought to control those. And so what happened in the US is it cost jobs. It cost jobs, it cost livelihoods, it created the Rust Belt. And so there was a gape of jobs that just went away because of unfair competition, state-supported unfair competition. China just last year dumped nearly 700 million tons of steel onto the global market. That's their excess capacity. And that's 9x what we make in a year here, and they're just dumping it onto the global market. And so when President Trump came on board in 2017, 2018, one of the initial things that he did is he said, we need a strong steel industry here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the 232 process. It's national security tariffs. And we're going to use this 232 process to bring steel manufacturing jobs back. And that's one of the things that he talked about during his first term. That's one of the things he absolutely talks about every day during his second term. And he's utilized those, and they are working. They are creating more jobs. They are driving untold investment. We have seen over the past few years, our members and others have invested more than $25 billion into the steel industry. And that's modernizing, that's creating new mills. Both Nucor and CMC have new projects going in West Virginia. And Nucor's is the largest investment in West Virginia history, not for a steel mill, for any investment.
Wow.
It's a $4 billion steel mill. CMC is invested significantly in West Virginia. And so we're seeing new mills opening. We're seeing more jobs. We're seeing more American production. For the first time since Bill Clinton was president, we have now surpassed Japan for steelmaking. And so we've moved up to number 3 globally. And that is because of these America First trade policies. That is because of the 232 steel tariff. And so it has significantly strengthened our industry and continues to do so.
Nice. Awesome. So who's number 2 on that list? I know China's probably number 1. Who's number 2?
China's number 1, India's number 2,
India,
and we're now number 3 for the first time since Bill Clinton was president, since the first Matrix came out.
That's impressive. Yeah, that's impressive. That's awesome. So one question I have, so Section 232 tariffs really took hold, what, 2018? Was that the year 2018? So originally we had it at 25%, right, on steel tariffs coming into the US. Now we've upped them to 50, right? What has been the change that you've seen from that doubling of the tariff amount? And is there, I want to say, is there a ceiling to that, or are we not high enough? Are we just at the right spot now? How has that change impacted the industry here?
Man, that's another great question. So at 25, and what we saw under the Biden administration is they decided to keep the 232s on steel. They kept it.
It stayed the last 8 years.
Yeah. It stayed, okay. But they allowed a lot of negotiations that created tariff rate quotas or some type of deal with other countries that allowed them to bring it in under a special deal. And so before President Trump took office in his second term, it was essentially Swiss cheese. And so it was helpful, but it wasn't as helpful. And so one of the first things President Trump did when he came back for his second term was he took out a lot of those exclusions. He took out a lot of the tariff rate quotas. He took out a lot of the special deals. And so 25% without exclusions, and then he moved it up to 50. And with those two pieces, we've seen some significant movement. Imports are down nearly 11%, and production is up. And so those two pieces right there, I mean, that's the purpose of these national security tariffs, is it identifies the steel industry as essential to national security, and it does everything it can to bring jobs back and ensure that if we can't have a robust steel industry, then we can't make the tanks, we can't make the battleships that all go to defending us.
Sure.
Same thing with our infrastructure. And so those have identified that steel is a national security imperative, and it continues to add to the steel industry. It continues to drive those investments, and it continues to reduce those harmful, unfairly made imports. And so we continue to see that it's a positive effect, a very positive effect.
It's great. It's great. So one question I have now, so this is going to air probably next week, so I don't know if we'll hear back by then, but there is a big Supreme Court ruling coming up. I just want to confirm, is Section 232 exempt from what they're looking to rule on?
Yes. So the Supreme Court ruling, which is, we've been saying it's any day now, starting in December.
Right. That's why I'm cautioning everybody,
So yeah, any day now, starting in December. But what the Supreme Court is ruling on is the president's use of so-called IEEPA, and that's Emergency Economic Authority,
right?
Reciprocal tariffs. And I don't believe they will, but even if the Supreme Court
don't believe they will?
I do not believe that they will.
That's different than a lot of the experts you're hearing. I'm curious as to why. You're in Washington, D.C. now. Do you know something that we don't?
I don't. We talk about this all the time. It's pretty much subject number 1, 2, and 3 that we talk about.
Okay.
I think what's going to happen is that the Supreme Court will probably find that there are some restrictions in there. The way the president's using it now is there's no time limit, there's really no product limit, no country limit.
Right.
It's a blanket. I think that the Supreme Court will probably find that there might need to be time limits, there might need to be country limits, but I don't believe that the Supreme Court is going to say that IEEPA itself does not authorize tariffs. There's a predecessor to IEEPA that essentially was used in a similar way. The language is strikingly similar. So I don't believe that the Supreme Court will knock down the IEEPA. I think that the administration will essentially get the opportunity to correct it with the Supreme Court's guidance. And so that might be time limits. It might be a few tweaks here and there. But even if they did, which I don't believe they will, but even if they did say that IEEPA does not authorize tariffs, that does not impact the 232 steel tariffs, because those are two different authorities. And the 232 steel tariffs have been tested in court, and the court has upheld them. So that is not a concern for the steel industry. Whereas everyone, including the steel industry, everyone's watching what's going to happen with the Supreme Court and the reciprocal tariffs. But even if they were knocked down in the Supreme Court, which again, I don't believe they will be, they would not affect the 232 steel tariffs.
Got it. Okay. So to confirm to all our listeners, regardless of whatever the Supreme Court decides, Section 232 is here to stay, still paying 50%.
Absolutely. The administration is very happy with the impacts they're seeing. Production up, imports down. They don't want to change that.
Good. Okay. And I'm sure if the off chance the president is watching, he'll be very pleased to know that you don't think the Supreme Court will be changing much. So that's good. Very good. One question I have for you too, Brandon, because this whole economy is connected, right? I mean, steel all the way down from raw steel down to the end product. So much goes into it, so much different equipment, labor, and those are all affected by maybe some of those reciprocal tariffs too, right? What has been the impact that you've seen on the steel industry as a result of the reciprocal tariffs? Has there been any change that you've noticed simply by that adjustment, not just the increase from 25 to 50% on Section 232, But just downstream with everything else involved, everything that goes in, have you seen just an overall uptick in interest in domestic manufacturing as a whole? What has been your take on that, if any?
So largely what we've seen last year is President came in, he made a lot of these announcements. Liberation Day was April 2nd. June, he moved the steel tariffs up to 50%. And so there's kind of been a trickle of announcements throughout the year. And it's clear where this administration wants to go. They want to rebalance trade.
Yeah.
On steel, what we've heard from a lot of our members is 2025, a lot of these decisions were being announced. You didn't have a full year with them. And there was still some lingering long-term contracts. As you move into 26, a lot of the people were looking for domestic sourcing. Even if they hadn't been using domestic sourcing before, they were looking for domestic sources of this. And that's the power of a 50% strong steel tariff is and we get questions every day. As you know, you've seen a few decades of deindustrialization in the US where a lot of manufacturing jobs have gone away. And so as we're bringing these back, not every product is made in sufficient quantity in the US. That's across the board. It's steel industry as well, but it's across the board. Not everything in the US is made in sufficient quantities domestically. And so we get calls all the time. Do your members make X product? And then if the answer is no, are they willing to make X product? And so this is something that is driving so you've got the raw steel production, but then you've got pipe, tube, you've got a lot of the other derivatives that are also being driven by this strong 232 tariff, as well as for the first time, there used to be an exclusions process, and Commerce has started an inclusions process because the raw steel itself, we're the tip of the spear. China can easily dump raw steel. And then when you have a strong tariff that prevents the dumping of the raw steel, these bad actors will immediately turn to steel intensive goods, put their cheap steel in the steel intensive goods, and then dump those goods. And so raw steel, we're the tip of the spear, but you certainly see that from other industries. And this inclusions process, the derivatives process that Commerce started, you saw robust engagement with Commerce because folks downstream are saying, well, now that we have a very strong steel tariff that's going to prevent dumping of steel, I don't want our products dumped. And so this is driving more products being manufactured in the US.
Got it. Okay, great. 2 points I want to, on the topic of tariffs, to discuss. So one, currently in America right now, affordability is the major concern over many Americans, right? Prices aren't necessarily going down, but the rate of inflation is. Which is contrary to what a lot of experts have predicted as the fallout from tariffs, is a pretty sustainable lower inflation rate under 3%. However, people still are feeling the pain, right, from the COVID spending years and the devaluation of our dollar over that time period. So one thing I want to say here is, with tariffs, right, whether it's reciprocal, whether it's Section 232, everything comes downstream, right? There's a ton of metal in our cars. We're buying cars, right? Car prices are higher. All different types of products. I did a poll, and I have a pretty large network on LinkedIn that consists of mainly folks in the steel industry. Now, many of these folks could be on the distribution side, which could skew it a little bit, but I did a poll when Section 232 tariffs were up from 25 to 50%. And it was a little mixed. About 50% supported it, 50% opposed it. Couple that with the way sentiment is on affordability. Are we headed in the right direction as far as tariffs are concerned? And another point that I want to make is, with bringing steel production back here at home, are tariffs the only solution, or are there other ways we can go about it without, possibly inflating the price of goods? Or is this not really the case and we don't have to worry about too much inflation? I know that's a lot to throw out at you, but what are your thoughts on that one?
So when there are stats, I love to quote stats. The U.S. International Trade Commission, the ITC, in 2023 did a study, and this is before it was at 50%, but did a study of the 232 tariffs, which at that point had been in effect for 5 years. And they discovered that imports went down, maybe not as drastically as they are at 50%, but imports went down. But those downstream price increases were less than 1%, 0 or 0.07, something along those lines of less than 1%. And so when you look at, you mentioned automotive, look at some of the steel intensive sectors. You've got automotive, you've got infrastructure, you've got energy, and all of those play a key component. But even in automotive, it's such a tiny percentage of the overall automotive that if you're looking at a 30, a 40, a $50,000 car, and if steel prices do go up, and largely what we're seeing is steel prices are cyclical. You can't really tie the increase in prices to the 232s. But let's make an argument and say that because of the 232s, steel goes up slightly. You're not going to end up seeing a huge difference in your 30, 40, or $50,000 automotive. 1 or 2 tons of steel in a car, depending on what car you're getting. And so if steel goes up slightly, if it does, and we haven't seen that it's really driven by the 232s, then you're not going to be paying a premium. And there's a lot more that goes.
Right. So if you go from $800 a ton to $1,000 a ton, then it's let's say you had 2 tons, and it's only $400 extra in your car.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
And that's if an automaker passes on every
100% of the, yes. Okay.
Exactly.
So, okay. Makes sense. And so you've only seen, that's pretty remarkable, right? Because it goes against what a lot of experts are trying to warn people about. And, the pessimist is, the consumer is going to absorb a lot of these tariffs. But you're only seeing about 1% of the actual price being absorbed. So who are companies themselves absorbing this cost? How is this being dealt with that you see?
It's, the answer is different for every sector. A lot of times, and again, the question is different if you're talking about 232s versus reciprocal.
Right.
But on the 232s for steel, again, you're seeing the cyclical prices and not necessarily a 232 driven price. And largely the market has adopted to those cyclical nature of the prices. And so you're not really seeing the price increase. You're not really seeing, and this is what the ITC study has said, is you're not really seeing inflation from steel tariffs. And it's, what we've seen a lot from the president is rebalancing of that trade. Yeah. And you've got the two pieces here. You've got the affordability piece. You got the, making sure that prices are affordable up and downstream for consumer facing, for business facing. But then you have the demand for these projects and that's one of the things that the president and Ambassador Greer are bringing back is you've got, Japan going to invest billions of dollars into the U.S. on infrastructure projects. Nearly every project, nearly every agreement they come back with includes investments in the U.S. And that's another piece too that's coming with these tariffs, and it's coming because of the tariffs, is because they're using them to rebalance trade. And that's another thing that has a positive effect on our economy, our steel sector, every bit of that. Is those projects. The Congress is getting ready to do a surface transportation bill, our highway bill. And every 5 years they do one, and that drives huge demand for steel because every bit of that is driven by American-made rebar. And so those are the two things that we're looking at. And then you're absolutely right. Everyone talks about affordability. The way we like to talk about affordability is obviously inflation's gone up and down over the last 8 years. Just take nearly a 10-year chunk. One of the things that has the most positive impact on affordability, regardless of what's happening in the outside world, is those good paying steel jobs. If you work at a steel mill, average wages $140,000. That builds families, that builds communities. And then regardless of what's happening with inflation, regardless of what's happening in the country, those prepare you to be able to make life more affordable. You see folks for some of these steel mill jobs, you see folks drive 60, 70 miles, hours into another state just to be able to go with those benefits that are afforded from working in the steel industry.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about affordability, absolutely, it's something that affects absolutely everyone. But when we look at the steel industry, we believe that the steel industry and those steel jobs are helping make life more affordable for everyone that works in the industry.
They do. And that's why I call it American Dream Search. And that's why we play steel candidates all day long. So
Absolutely.
that's the thing. I mean, look, that's the whole reason I do business, right? And I'm more on the sales, the commercial side, but this is an industry that, you know, civilization, what would we be without steel, right? It's the backbone of America. It's one of our triedest and truest industries. It's been around for well over 100 years. And it's not going anywhere, right? Because it's such a necessity. And some of the jobs that it produces, whether it's on the commercial side or on the production floor, like you said, $140,000 as an average, wage for this industry. Think of what that does for states like West Virginia that are getting new mills, new plants, right? That is generally not an income that, the average resident there is going to be accustomed to. So that's a great higher paying wage that's going to support communities. It's going to lift them up. And, you can't really fully stop inflation, but you can out earn it. And if you're getting jobs like that, you could certainly, increase your standard of living. So that's what it's all about. And that's the American dream, right? We gotta work our way through it, and that's what we do here at American Dream Search, just place people in those roles. But awesome, Brandon. Well, thank you for your synopsis on that. I want to get your rating. So Trump 2.0, how do you rate the current administration on how it's tackling the steel industry right now?
I would say 5 stars. For the steel industry, you look at his Davos speech, you look at every time he has a cabinet. I was told by one of Trump's cabinet secretaries the other day, he said, even when we're not talking about anything related to steel, President Trump starts talking about the steel industry. It's something that is near and dear to his heart, and you've got a tremendously strengthened 232 steel tariff. And every day his administration goes to bat for the men and women that make steel. So I would say that he is truly a champion of the steel industry.
That's great. And what we talked about what's working, right? Which is Section 232, creating demand, building more domestic manufacturing. What is there anything that they could be doing differently? Anything that you would advise to do more of? Anything specific?
Well, number one thing that we talk about all the time is by far the 232 is the most effective thing. And we're thankful every day for that.
Sure.
But you're absolutely right. There's more that they are doing and there's more that can be done. So the 232s are vital to level the playing field. What that essentially does is it provides us a level playing field to where we can compete with the Chinas who have a $4 a day wage. We can compete with the Chinas that don't have the same type of environmental regulations that we do. But beyond that, which levels the playing field and is very important for us, is the demand drivers elsewhere. We need those roads and bridges to be built. We need new AI data centers. Every AI data center is heavily steel intensive.
Sure. I talked with a client the other day that won a huge project on those. So perfect, I know all about it.
And so everything you're building here, if you're building a new manufacturing facility, you're using American-made steel. And so every bit of those, every time they bring back more investment for the U.S., every time they are creating or helping create projects throughout the country, those drive demands for steel. The president just released last week a shipbuilding plan. And there is, that's a lot of American made steel right there. We absolutely need to redo our fleet. And so all of those are drivers of demand. And that's our message to this administration is keep pushing, keep staying strong in the steel 232s, which we know they are, and then keep pushing those drivers for demand because those increase the demand and increase our production.
Great. one more time back to 232. I know he did float. I don't know if it was hyperbole or sarcasm, but possibly upping it to 100%. Is that something that is being taken serious? And if it is, would you advise for it or against it?
That's another great question. The president loves to he's a constant he's tweaking things, he's making sure that we can rebalance in the best way possible. That's something I've heard him float before. It's not something that I know of that it's being actively worked on.
Okay.
There are some sectors, and this is going to be largely pipe and tube, oil and gas. There are some sectors and some countries that are selling directly through the 50% tariff. I'm not sure if they're eating it. I'm not sure what they're doing, but in some sectors, we're seeing that the 50% tariff not having as much of an effect as it is on global steel production. And so I can see other ways, and I'm not sure if the correct answer is bumping it to 100. I'm not sure if it's putting a hard quota on certain countries, but I know that there is conversation around some of these areas, and pipe and tube in particular, where the 50% isn't having as large of an impact as we would think it would. And I think it's largely because other countries still, even at a detriment to their profits, they still want access to our market.
Right.
And so I could see further work being done there.
Okay.
To ensure, and I don't know if it's the appropriate level. I don't know if the president wants to put 100% or he just floated that. But I could see more work being done in those areas.
Okay. So pipe and tube is, we're looking at it. We've noticed some are absorbing the 50%, not having the impact that we would have anticipated. But overall, pretty happy with the 50% rate as a whole. It is leading towards more domestic investment and production. And, and then your other advice would be continue to increase the demand for the steel projects, which they are. So, okay. Very good. So with that said, Brandon, what is your future outlook on steel? Think about the next 5 to 10 years. Where do you see this industry going? What changes do you see on the horizon? And I guess after you discuss that, what would be your advice to, leaders within the industry, whether it's on the manufacturing or distribution side?
Over the next 5 years, I see there's going to continue to be a focus on making more, probably in the derivatives products. Because I think that on raw steel capacity, we are pretty darn close to being able to provide just about everything we need. And where I see a lot of the growth is going to be on those derivative products, the things that we get asked a question every day of, do you produce this? And if the answer is no, would you produce this? The president, we've clearly got 3 more years left of President Trump's second term, and the 232s are here to stay. And that's where you make a lot of investment decisions, knowing that the president is going to stay strong on these. So I have a very bright outlook for the steel industry over the next 5 years. I think it's going to be a lot of growth. I think it is going to be making products in the US that we haven't made in years. And that's because there is a demand and a driver for American-made steel. And for any of the leaders on these companies, it's continue to do what you're doing. You're investing in your people. We have our wages versus standard manufacturing wages are outstanding. And so what they do is every time we were talking about the West Virginia projects, every time a new mill is opened, every time a new facility is opened, it fosters a community. And so continue to invest in your people, continue to invest in these communities. And this is driving exactly what you say. This is driving the American dream.
Yeah. Awesome. Very good. One thing I just wanted to ask this too, because I know domestic production, specifically of carbon steel, has benefited greatly from these tariffs. But I do know that folks, particularly on the specialty metal side, where a lot of that has been imported, whether it's stainless or aluminum, has been a little bit more difficult. And I want to cite, I think it might have been the CEO of Algoma, or I don't want to put names out there because I don't fully know. But one of the issues that was also brought up was it's not just the tariff incentive, there also is an energy aspect to the production as well, and certain energy policy. Have you advised the president or his administration on specific actions regarding energy that would help increase aluminum production or, other specialty metals?
We do talk to the administration all of the time on electricity policy. That is energy policy. If you're connected to a grid, the largest grid user is either going to be your AI data centers or your EAF steelmaking. Okay. And that's every time one of our members is looking to grow, they look at the grid and they say, is there enough production here? Is there enough energy generation here? What does the grid look like? How can we get the power there? And yes, the president and his team are very excited to grow our power generation, very excited to grow the grid. And that's something we talk about on nearly a daily basis with him and his folks. And they're very excited to help as well, because they understand to be able to meet any of their goals, to bring back manufacturing, we need more power.
Great. Awesome. Very good. So that was one piece of advice. Anything else you want to share to business leaders out there in the industry, or maybe other lawmakers? Any other words of wisdom?
So I will say to any of the lawmakers, any of the industry leaders, thank you for everything you've done. Please continue to stand strong for the steel industry. It really it's built our society. It's built modern society, and it will continue to rebuild America and continue to level the playing field and allow us to compete. And when the American steel industry can compete, we win.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great note to end it on, Brandon. Do you have any other parting thoughts or words?
No, I just appreciate everything you do. And thank you so much for having us on today.
Of course. Where can folks connect with you, Brandon?
You can look at us at steelnet.org, and we're the Steel Manufacturers Association.
Awesome. Very good. We'll include those in the show notes. And Brandon Farris, thank you for coming on the podcast. We do appreciate it, and long live the steel industry. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Recruiter of Steel podcast. If you enjoyed our finished product, please subscribe and leave a rating. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.